Hello and welcome to The Knowledge, which is a live Q&A with some of our academics at Keele. These are our special lockdown editions, and today we are joined by Professor Ken Rotenberg. So Ken, we've done one of these previously. Do you want to introduce yourself and sort of talk about what your area of expertise is at Keele?
Generally, my expertise, I'm a professor research fellow, which effectively means I'm doing research exclusively on behalf of Keele University. I'm a professor. My expertise is largely in interpersonal trust. I have some 5 books, 40 publications, more than that actually at this point in time on that topic. But I also do things such as loneliness and also disclosures. And I do them all the way from birth, largely, all the way to very old age.
Thank you. So, Ken, today we're going to talk about how trust has kind of played a part in the current pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So, you just want to tell us sort of overall how has it had an impact in how we responded to the pandemic and kind of how society has adapted to the changes?
Whether we can trust them depends on 3 factors, or 3 different bases, if you will. One is really the degree to which you think that it's honest, that the information regarding these medical regimes are honest, are basically truthful, are guided by benign rather than malevolent intentions. Also, in terms of reliability, that's fulfillment of a promise or a word. So whether you believe that they'll fulfill their promises for proper treatment or proper testing. And finally, also emotional trust, which is really, in a sense, depends on whether you think you can trust them to not harm you emotionally, particularly keep information confidential, and also not affect your life adversely. The pandemic, basically, in its success in treating it, all depends on those kinds of trust in the citizens, which are effective.
So you wrote a blog recently that said sort of studies since the 1960s have shown that trust in the government has declined. Why do you think that is?
Oh, there have been some global kind of assessments of trust in government and also in countries in general. And these aren't necessarily the most refined studies. By and large, there's declines in trust in government across the world. The best study, actually, that from my perspective, the most methodologically sound one, was done by Hetherington and Rudolph. And they basically did chart from about 1976 on to 2007 consistent declines in the Americans' trust in their government. They asked people, well, to what extent does the government doing the right thing, or the White House doing the right thing to be precise? And those declined consistently over time. But by and large, the research is what we call a time series analysis. And what really seems to be prompting these is economic concerns. People really do not believe that the economy is as solid or as effective as it used to be. And that seems to spur on these kinds of declines in terms of, declines in trust in the government. There's lots of reasons for this, but it isn't simply limited to the United States. I mean, there are declines presumably declines in our government. I was happening to look at a BBC report. They did a small survey in, I think, 2011. And they asked people to what extent did they ask these given individuals or given groups how much they could trust them to tell the truth, to be precise. And effectively what happened is that only 15% of the British sample said that they would actually trust their MPs to tell the truth. So it gives you some sort of sample. And the problem we have with the pandemic is, of course, this medical advice is largely funneled or provided through the government. And so it becomes infused, perhaps, with this kind of low, kind of depressed trust in government.
And, the government have currently enforced lockdown and social distancing measures. Does that have an effect on people's overall trust in each other and in other areas of their sort of daily life?
Of course, your trust in the prescriptions of lockdown depends on your trust in the government, of course. I mean, that's one aspect which I'm highlighting through all of this. In fact, anything that the now government and the medical professionals, which are not necessarily one and the same, All depends on people's trust, on those forms of trust that I identified in them. But also, the lockdown has effects on trust. It sort of, if you can say so, exacerbates the veins of distrust within societies. For example, there have been, for example, we can perhaps blame China for this pandemic, and in fact, it's been articulated. Well, these kinds of these type of positions are promoting distrust in other cultures, particularly the Chinese cultures, for example. But I suspect that some of these will also continue these fracture lines in distrust within our culture. We start distrusting others. It cuts us off from them and basically exacerbates the kind of distrust that we might experience. It also basically cuts people off generally from people who could provide support or help assess the honesty of things. It cuts them off from people that they trust and can provide help for them, as I mentioned, and things of that nature. Ultimately, what happens is we're going to see some, as we perhaps have seen, some declines in not only mental health and probably some physical health of the population.
And so the government are obviously releasing a new app to help contact tracing and to help us with sort of isolating the virus. Does this, and there's been a lot of articles on trust in this app and trust in people's personal data and things like that. How does the app sort of need people's trust for it to work?
Well, again, I've read some articles about this, and I must preface this by saying this is not my area of expertise. I'm a professor in psychology, and I can tell you those aspects of things. I've read about the apps. As far as I can tell, what they really do basically is that you can load them onto your phone, your smartphone. Basically, if you're near somebody who also has that app, they can indicate that in terms of a register. If you've indicated registered, in fact, whether you've had the COVID-19, then what it will do is alert the other persons, also alert the central registry, which is basically either the smartphone owner, and through them, basically through the government. Now, there's lots of concerns about this, about trust, and part of it has to get to what they call emotional trust, whether the information you've been gathered from you, personal information, is going to be used the way you think it's acceptable, into which you would approve. And there's some, and also there is some potential repercussions of that. My guess of this, and I'm just guessing about it based on my reading of this, is that people will try and find out who has had the COVID-19 or who they think has the COVID-19. And at the end of the day, it may lead to social rejection, substantial social rejection. I mean, those are concerns people have. The various issues of, it all surrounds the idea of also the fact of the personal confidentiality of the fact you've had COVID and whether that can become accessible to people who might use it to your disadvantage. Those are the concerns that have surfaced.
And I guess as well, when we're living in such a modern age with social media and online technology, how does that does the fake news side of things really affect the trust in the government and the trust in the medical professions, because there's also so much other noise and people having their own opinions on there? Does that affect trust within how lockdown and how social distancing is implemented?
Well, I think the availability of social media has changed things substantively. We've seen some major changes in people. I think part of the distrust in government and the downturns may be attributable to kind of the social media. Of course, you can get all sorts of crisscross and misinformation. That's one way this does it. But also, in fact, people now can get instantaneous information about what these government officials do. That is, immediately you can see. I mean, in past times, of course, you had to wait for some time for the media to print it out or for it to be released. Now, within 10 seconds of any sort of event, all these events are portrayed to us quickly, not only through TV, but of course through social media. What it does allow people to do is really bring it to bear in terms of social scrutiny. All these things are scrutinized immediately and quickly. And I think it leads to a degree, to some extent, to people becoming less trustful in them because they can, compare facts and figures also much more quickly than they could have before. But the other problem we have with it, as people know from all this, is that social media can be used to promote misinformation so effectively. A couple of the campaigns that I can think about, one of the course was the presidential campaign in the U.S., of course, for Trump, in which really they used these media to have false information. They create false consensus. They have a person basically sign on in terms of Facebook, identify themselves as a user, which in fact they're not actually individuals, they're just fabrications that are sent to other people to create a false consensus. So there's, in fact, there have been allegations that was used in fact, the presidential election in the U.S., but also allegations basically was raised during the context of Brexit and also would affect public opinion then. So the social media has a lot of effects and dramatic effects on trust and interweaves with, in fact, political decisions we made here in this country and other countries.
I think what's also interesting is how we can compare so easily what different governments around the world are also doing. So, for example, there's been a lot of talk around how New Zealand have handled it, and then comparing it to kind of how we've also then how our government's handled it. I'm guessing that's quite a new thing and kind of also harms the trust in our own government when you see something else that you like and you can kind of then decide that you would rather have that method.
I guess in that respect it can. I mean, it can be a double-edged sword in sense it can bring people down, but of course we can see in a positive light what other countries and people are doing to deal with this pandemic. So, as I say, it sort of interweaves with so many things, but the problem really is there's a great potential, unfortunately, for doing harm through the internet. And then, unfortunately, people can exploit it for their purposes, of course.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Ken. That is all the questions. I know that you've got a blog on our blog page, which is blogs.keele.ac.uk, where you can read about the things that you've spoken about today. Is there anything else that you've currently got going on in terms of research and that?
No. Well, yes, of course. I mean, various things. There's a paper that accompanies that, which I've submitted formally for publication. And of course, there are a variety. I could hope again. These books are not making huge amounts of money for me. I can say that honestly, but I write them so people can read them. So if they're willing and interested in reading any of my books, I'm more than happy. There's a Psychology of Trust. There's a Psychology of Interpersonal Trust. They're all very recent, and they cover a variety of these topics, that I'd mentioned today. And I do hope people do read them and kind of enjoy them.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Ken. We have many more of these live streams to come over the next few weeks, so do keep an eye on our Facebook page. But Ken, thank you very much for today. Thank you for answering all our questions, and have a good day and have the rest of lockdown. I hope it's as best as it can be for you, and you're keeping sane as much as possible.
Thank you, Tom, for asking me. I enjoyed it completely. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken, and see you again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.